We have Brooks from Problem Solutions. He is a former enterprise software developer turned solutions architect professional with expertise in software architecture, Internet of Things, enterprise mobility, emerging technology, business development, and product management. And he is here to answer all of your security questions about artificial intelligence. So without further ado, Brooks, I will let you take it over.
Thanks, everyone. I'll share my screen here. And I will not be monitoring the chat, but someone can. If there are questions, feel free to interrupt me as I'm going through. But as mentioned, our title today is Artificial Intelligence, Your Security Questions Answered. And want to get started with riding the AI wave. So don't want to wipe out AI. Privacy and security are the top of everyone's mind. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I hope to clarify some of that today for you. If you're in attendance, it's probably something that's coming up with your company. And we just want to kind of get started here on the right foot. So when you think about the real story here, Greg Brockman from OpenAI has this quote, and I think this is absolutely where we believe things are going, is the amplification of what humans can do, and that is the real story. We're all amazed by what AI can do today. There's so many different things like revolutionizing learning experiences and elevating customer experiences and boosting engagement and productivity, democratizing knowledge and experience and expertise, driving the business growth and innovation, staying competitive. We always say that the race has started, whether you kind of like it or not. The gun went off, and are you going to still be in the blocks or moving down the track? And sustainability and scalability for sure. I think we'll look back at what we're doing with AI today, though, in about 5 years, and we'll look at it like we do these websites from the 90s. And it'll look pretty archaic the way that we were using AI in a text-based chat interface. It is magic right now for us, just like these websites and properties were back then. But I think what we'll see is more natural language conversing with these AI agents and with these systems in a more natural language and spoken voice. We're already seeing GitHub Copilot and other development tools have these natural language interfaces that are democratizing the ability to code and the ability to create content, generative AI from an artwork perspective. Really, you now have that at your fingertips where if you can think it, you can create it. So one of the few things I wanted to talk about today are some how might we questions. And I think a lot of us are looking at this around how do we upskill people and build digital skills to leverage AI. And ELB and the team have some boot camps designated at helping to upskill the workforce. And I think that's really imperative. And people getting more comfortable with these tools will start to see the closer adoption. But how do we ensure AI transparency and foster trust, improve the data practices and the governance? What about security and privacy regulations? Some of us are in highly regulated environments like finance or aerospace, healthcare. How do we ensure that our data is private and that we're complying with regulatory guidance? Building the augmented intelligence teams of the future where AI is augmenting certain business functions. How might we amplify performance? So what is an adaptive learning organization? We talk about this a lot at our organization, and it's really about putting people first and having an ecosystems first thinking, connecting, having that connective collaboration across teams, being purpose-driven in your design, and then looking at some of these other items around ideas and feedback and focus on outcomes, and understanding that technology is just a component. And this comes into ecosystems thinking around how do we build systems for human usage that are going to maximize benefit and value for them using it. Quick primer, a lot of language going around today. I'm not sure if everyone is aware of what all of these things mean. I hear people say GPT all the time from OpenAI and ChatGPT, but just wanted to give some definition so that everyone can see like what that actually stands for, like generative pre-trained transformer, which comes from the transformer model of neural networks. which was actually a research paper in 2017 from Google that a lot of the AI research labs latched onto and have created what we have today, from Stability AI and Stable Diffusion to Midjourney to OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and so on. So with great power comes great responsibility, and we're hearing a lot of AI safety and risk and ethics and compliance talk and ask for regulations. I didn't know where this quote actually came from. I thought it was from a presidential address or something, but it was actually from 1962 Spider-Man comic with Stan Lee. And I just want to get into some foundation model talk. So when we think about foundation models, we have OpenAI, ChatGPT, which most of you are probably aware of, has 100 million users a day, 2 million developers, and over 92% of Fortune 500s have accounts. Anthropic's Claude, and Google's Bard, soon to be Google Gemini. These are what we call foundation models. There are more, and there are open source models as well. Here you'll see a listing of just a few, things like Mosaic's MPT-30B, Vicuña, Llama or Llama 2, Falcon models, Cohere, and so on. There's literally thousands of these, and there's very narrow ones being trained and developed every single day. So it's very difficult to stay ahead of this fast-moving wave. There's a lot of information coming at all of us very quickly. This was actually from Stanford EDU regarding foundation model transparency index scores from 2023. And what this gets to when we talk about AI data privacy and we talk about ethics and we talk about security, we also get into bias and understanding what went into the models. What is the base knowledge of these models? What is it trained on? And this kind of shows the transparency score from this source of Stanford researchers. You can read the entire paper, the links at the bottom here. I'll share the slides after. And you can kind of see where we're not actually able to see what is going on in each one of these models. Even OpenAI GPT-4 came in at about a 48%. So what are some of the major concerns that we hear day in and day out? We hear about user data refining, retention policies of generative AI. We hear about the tools and the gaps and what does it look like for preserving this data in privacy. Are my prompts going to get leaked? Are they going to train the models on what I send to the models? So hopefully we'll be able to explain how that works today and which models are safe and which ones are not from a free perspective. We'll also talk about some regulations that most of us will grapple with, evolving frameworks like the EU AI Act, GDPR, CCPA, and so on. So kind of looking at foundation models in one aspect, they do have what's called data processing addendums. So you can get a DPA agreement with OpenAI's ChatGPT Enterprise. You can also get it with Anthropic's Claude. You can get it with Google. So what this is a legal contract that says they will not use your data for training purposes. They have a retention policy around how long they'll keep the data. You have requests that you can make to have the data deleted and so on. GDPR compliance and so on. Enterprise GPT and API customers with OpenAI, no data is used for training the models. I'll show you a screenshot here in a few slides from the keynote on Monday, the 6th, this week, where they actually had this slide on stage as well. Now, free GPT, if you're using a free ChatGPT account or a GPT Plus account, the data is not totally private or protected. We usually say in the technology industry, if the product is free, you're usually the product, right? Your data is actually the product. Claude 2, also not totally private or protected, and Google Bard. So if you're looking, you need to have a DPA agreement, or you need to be using an orchestration layer that has SOC 2 compliance and has these types of agreements in place where your data is not going to be shared with the foundation model company for training purposes. Also on Dev Day, again on the 6th, they announced Copyright Shield for OpenAI. And what Copyright Shield means is that they will literally go to your aid from a legal perspective. If you get sued for copyright infringement of any kind, they'll pay the legal costs and defend. So they're creating a guarantee around copyright infringement when using their models. And they'll back that with legal and assets to do so. Also, the slide that I mentioned on stage, that's Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. We do not train on your data from the API. So if you're using the API from a custom application and bringing ChatGPT services into your training, into your software application, into your website, they will not train on your data ever. Or if you're using a GPT enterprise account. This is an example, an actual example of a data processing addendum from OpenAI, just to show everyone that these legal contracts do exist. And these are some notional topographies to help some of your IT or compliance professionals get comfortable with how AI could work within your organization. So we hear about data being shared or stored outside of the organization as being a security risk. So what this is showing is inside of your corporate firewall, you can have your files, your data, your network, your APIs. You could have a knowledge graph or vector databases, different software applications, lots of documents connected. All of that can live within your corporate firewall. If you have the right DPA agreements, you can share that through TLS, which is encryption in transit and at rest, AES 256, to something that is a SOC 2 compliant foundation model like OpenAI. So this is a secure transaction back and forth, and then you have the data privacy as well. Another topography might be where you have your own corporate cloud. So you are using something like AWS or Azure from Microsoft or Google Cloud, GCP. And you might have your own enterprise GPT model that you're standing up, or you might have your own Bedrock model that you're standing up on AWS. That's all within your corporate firewall. It's within your virtual network, and you can still share this information because you have your own model. You have less concerns. You don't need a DPA because that's all part of you having your own private model. Those are more expensive, usually reserved for large organizations. And another one might be where you want to run your own private LLM on your own servers. So there's a lot of movement around Llama 2 and other open source models that can be fine-tuned to your business needs. They can also have your data added as far as retrieval augmentation generation, where you can take documents and have those stored in something like a knowledge graph or a vector database, and have that knowledge actually supplement the base model's knowledge and then be able to respond in natural language. You can host these types of models within your own infrastructure. You will need, as you might have heard, large systems and GPUs to process these things efficiently and effectively so that you're not waiting 5 minutes for a response. You're waiting something like 5 milliseconds. Some additional things or privacy threats with large language models also include training data poisoning. So you can imagine if the training data that this thing was based on is somehow tampered with, now every response is biased or tampered in that perspective. You can also do things like sandboxing, where you can control access to the LLM outputs. So this will also prevent unintentional data exposures. Supply chain vulnerabilities, this comes into plugins. So when you're using a large language model, if you start adding plugins from a third-party developer, you don't actually know where those third-party developers are from or what that content or code looks like, and it may be leaking sensitive information. So be careful with the third-party plugins and which ones you use. Having sensitive information disclosures and plugin security, as I mentioned, like supply chain. So there's some approaches to secure your LLMs, like around data contagion, data obfuscation, and opaque prompts. And I'll actually show an example of what this looks like. It's a very technical type of thing, but once you see it in action, you'll understand in this next slide. So you can take things like names, addresses, turn those into variables, then pass those to the large language model, and then have those variables pass back in an answer, replace the variables with the content, in a secure environment and then bring that back to the enterprise. So this is a way to obfuscate the prompts and that you're removing things like social security numbers, phone numbers, addresses, certain names, and so on. So there's obviously some legal and ethical implications as well with generative AI challenges. We see, is it disclosing proprietary information? Could it be violating IP protections, exposing personal data? This is obviously a concern. And the way that you want to approach this when speaking with your teams is looking at, do we have the right data privacy agreements in place? Do we have DPAs? Do we have the right third-party systems integrated with our LLMs? How are we securing it? Where's our data coming from to ensure that you have the privacy around that? Evolving regulations are going to be something that we see from governments and various institutions over the next coming years. And then the implementation of best practices. And we'll get into how you can start to create an AI data policy, how you can start to get ready. And ELB works with us on what's called AI readiness assessments, where we're looking at things like data quality, we're looking at data readiness, we're looking at the ethical concerns, we're looking at risks. We're also looking at proof of concept opportunities that can be built and something that you can think big, start small, and then begin to scale those opportunities as you pilot them. So quick warning, free AI is not private. Do not provide intellectual property to free AI tools. We've seen some of this in the news. There are ways to be safe, but when you're using free AI, consider the source of you may be the product there if it's free. OWASP is the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. They have a really good PDF. I'll have a QR code on the next screen that talks about what are prompt injections and how do you handle insecure output handling and data training, training data poisoning and so on. This is a really good PDF if you want to scan it and download it or get the slides after this session. Absolutely, that's a really good resource and can explain a lot of how these things can be insecure and then how to create best practices around securing your AI infrastructure. So kind of getting into this whole concept of AI readiness, when we think about AI governance, obviously people are looking at guardrails and we talk a lot about hallucination. So there's some misnomers there. You can guardrail a large language model and the current AI systems to not respond in hallucinations. You can give them a very constrained corpus of knowledge that they can be smart about and only answer questions based on what is in those documents. So for instance, we work with standard operating procedures all the time. And most of those are stored in SharePoint or some type of intranet. They're very difficult to find. They're kind of all over the place. You do a search, you might get a list of 3 of them or 4 of them back. You click on one, you go through a 16-page doc, figure out that's not the one you need, go back to the search. So imagine that all of the data in those SOPs was trained into the AI, and it could answer questions as a just-in-time performance support tool for any of your field workers, any of your frontline workers, any of your leadership. It could just answer those questions. We see a lot of this around standard operating procedures, policies, HR, where imagine if you're onboarding and hiring 800 new employees this year, there's going to be a lot of questions that come into 401k, FMLA, PTO, work from home policy, so on and so forth. There's no reason that an AI wouldn't be able to answer those questions based on your constrained corpus of knowledge. And you can eliminate the hallucinations or even going to the base knowledge of an LLM and only answer questions on that constrained corpus of documentation. So you can ensure quality, reliability, and compliance of AI inputs and outputs using guardrails. And when we think about enterprise AI, it's all about governance, it's about people, it's really about data, because all of these AIs live on what we call an information diet. So it's garbage in, garbage out. It's all based on the data quality, what they have access to. If you have a highly curated, really good set of data that you're training it on, it's going to respond appropriately. And then obviously security, technology, and analytics around usage. So corporate governance policies, enterprise risk management programs, regulatory compliance, all very important topics in AI governance. The ability to audit and monitor inputs and outputs, how it's being used, what it's outputting, having what's called reinforcement learning, human feedback. So if you've seen the thumbs up and the thumbs down, whenever you're using something like ChatGPT, what that's doing is creating a reinforcement loop. So if it's a bad response and you give it a thumbs down, that's going to go to a review where a human in the loop can actually look at that. How you can automate something like that with your own corpus of knowledge is when somebody's asking a question, let's say that you built an AI agent and it's deployed in your Slack instance, and your group can ask questions of it. Maybe it's around product information or marketing or case studies. And it's getting a response that, the individual that's asking the question doesn't think is that good. They can give it a thumbs down. You can put that into a Slack triage channel and tag whoever the subject matter expert is in that loop. They can answer the question as a human, and then you can rescrape that channel and train the AI on the human answers that were made. So as mentioned, the AI readiness assessment is really a great first step for organizations that are taking their first step into AI and want to create a strategy and plan around it, have the right policies, have the right security protocols in place, understand the tools that are currently available to them and how to use them best. And when we think about part of the AI readiness assessment, we go through an AI maturity map. And part of that are these different stages. Now, most companies that we talk to are in this reactive stage where they have limited awareness. They are doing some ad hoc experiments, but they have no formal strategy around it yet. Others are emerging where they've started to establish that strategy. They're putting some governance in place. They have pilots and some initiatives going on where it's not just kind of ad hoc right now. Fewer are moving up to operational, where there is a formal strategy in place. You have AI in production environments. You're starting to scale your initiatives and upskilling the workforce along the way on how to use these various AIs in AI technology. So the more capable an AI is, the more training it requires. So if you create a single function AI agent that's really good at creating emails, and it knows all your email templates and it can help you with emails, that doesn't require as much training, because if I go to the AI agent for email, I assume what I'm going to do is use it to help me write emails. However, if I build a corporate-wide AI agent that can help me with HR, can help me with sales, can help me with marketing and ops and so on, then all of a sudden it requires more training because it has more capabilities. And then innovative companies are starting to build new AI solutions, thought leadership. They're leading unique industries. They're building culture, and they have AI innovation and experiments going on like R&D. And then one of my last slides here is around the AI roadmap. So this is, if you're starting in this kind of like AI readiness and starting to plan, it's really about articulating a vision for AI, setting some goals. So what are those business objectives? You want to build the business case, and you want to build that around value. What's the ROI around that? What are some goals that we want? Use cases. How do we identify use cases where AI can meet these objectives? What are some low-hanging fruit that we could get started with? What are some areas where automation would be really useful in saving hours of time for certain staff members? From a value perspective, what is the business value? So it's all about the business why. Why would we do this? What's it going to do for our customers? What's it going to do for our staff? What's it going to do for the quality, the safety of our company, and so on? Thinking about what is the implementation cost. When you're using AI tools, especially generative AI tools, you have tokens, which are generations of either text or photos or video content. that's going to cost based on usage. Obviously, text being the least expensive, and things like ChatGPT 4 Turbo that just came out this week have now decreased their cost by 2.75 times over inputs and output tokens. So inputs are typically cheaper and outputs are typically more expensive. But it's getting an understanding around the populace and who would use these AI tools to really understand what the total cost would be, because it's more than just building it. You're also going to pay for the usage of these tools. And it seems pretty cheap when it's like 0.003 cents per 750 words. But if you have 10,000 employees using that, that can add up as well. Then thinking about use cases from an ROI horizon, and then lastly, governance and managing risks. So I will end here and open up for any questions or ideas.
All right, thank you so much, Brooks. We do have a couple questions. So, all right, here's one. I have heard that some of the LLM's text generation has been getting worse today, more generic, for example, than it was in the earlier days, because it's training on AI-generated responses instead of quality human writers. Have you noticed that trend?
Yeah, so I have not noticed that trend. I've seen research around math early in like the spring of 2023, where some problems it was getting right earlier, and later in the model that they were releasing, it was getting those same problems incorrect. But I personally have not seen that. It is, for the use cases that we're doing, it has been plenty creative for us. Also, we're seeing a lot of use cases where companies want to add their own content to the AI, and they want it to respond within that content. So if they're adding, like, again, standard operating procedures or so on, they're using that content, that constrained corpus. Or if you're teaching a curriculum, you might just want to train on that curriculum. It's going to do that extremely well when it has the right system in place.
Gotcha. And then another question, image generation seems to be getting better and better. Number of fingers is correct. Text looks better, for example. What would cause this? Like, why, how is it able to get better?
Yeah, so DALL-E 3 is the most recent update from an image generation standpoint. And if you look at images from DALL-E 2 to DALL-E 3 now, significant improvements, definitely with the fingers. Also with text, if you tried to put some text like, hey, this is Brooks holding a sign and the sign says ELB. If you did that in previous models, you might get a lot of hieroglyphic style characters or incorrect character order, where it kind of looks right, but you can tell it's AI generated. It's gotten so much better. You can try that with DALL-E 3 today. You can do it for free in the Microsoft Bing image generator. If you don't have an OpenAI account, you can do it right through Bing to get access to that and see what it can do. Adobe Fireflies is another one that's doing extremely well. But to answer the question of how did it get better, it's being trained on much larger data sets. So for instance, Adobe Firefly has access to all of Adobe stock, right? And it can train on all of those pictures of hands and people, and you can get very photorealistic quality from that. So what we're seeing is the improvement based on the training data set getting larger and larger. And we're talking, it's kind of incomprehensible, the amount of data that these are trained on, like trillions and trillions and trillions of files.
All right. And if you are using those image generators, are there copyright concerns that you need to be worried about with those images?
So I know that Adobe has also this copyright protection, so that you need to look at which image generation that you're using. So Stable Diffusion is an open source, and they do have the ability that if an artist believes that their training, like their photos or their paintings or their artwork was used in the training data set, they can request removal of that from Stable Diffusion and Stability AI. But being an open source project, I'm not sure that they have the copyright protection. or the assets to defend whoever's using it. But companies like OpenAI, companies like Adobe are absolutely instituting these kind of copyright agreements to say, we guarantee that this is not copyright infringement and we will defend you as such.
Great, thank you. All right, it looks like we have covered all of, we have a comment saying Adobe just had a great webinar about copyright, that any image they're generating for you is protected. So thank you, Joel, for that comment. All right, it looks like we have answered all of the questions in the chat. We have ever another minute or so if they want to very quickly type one last question in. Otherwise, thank you so much, Brooks, for joining us. There was some really great info in here. It is so important to make sure that you are being secure and protected, especially since AI is not going away. It is sticking around. And as Brooks mentioned, ELB Learning offers AI services, including readiness assessments, boot camps to help your employees get up to speed with all of this. And we can also build some AI agents for you, as Mike showed earlier in the week.